ask, how many of you have been in the military? How many of you know somebody who's been in the military? Okay, so let me tell you 4 things about 4 different branches of the military. The Army talks doctrine. You'll hear everything coming from the Army is about doctrine. The Air Force view on doctrine is we write doctrine in history. So we don't worry too much.
Whatever we did is doctrine.
The Navy can't do anything without a cup of coffee. And the Marines don't do anything without a rock drill, which is a sandbox where they actually have rocks and move around representing the forces that are going places and doing things. The Air Force can't do anything without PowerPoint. So you're going to get a PowerPoint Air Force presentation. I will tell you that there are 2 things I want to tell you about me. I'm an Air Force officer, so you get PowerPoint. Second thing is that I'm an intelligence officer for longer than I care to remember right now, going up on 56 years. And one of the first things you got to do, and I'm not sure I'm pushing the right button here. First task you got to do is identify your audience and what your audience is about and so on and so forth. So I've been watching patiently for a couple hours. And I'll bet that everyone in this room can identify with at least 1 or 6 of those characters up on the board there. So I got you pegged. I know the audience, and I'll tell you in advance that I can't deal with all those animals. So I'm going to talk to the ones that are cute and quiet and patriotic and so on and so forth. But that's your first task. Your second task is determine what you're supposed to do. And I've clearly figured out what mine is, and I'm doing it. I'm just presenting spellbinding pontification. The next task you do is identify your jobs, your active participants. And this is what you're supposed to be doing, so damn it, take notes. And if we get no brilliant questions, then I fail. What I'm going to talk about is going to allude to a lot of the things that previous speakers have already mentioned, and I'll try in some way do some unnatural acts to get on theme with several of them. So, thinking about space, and I'm going to take this from a very broad level, from a lot of different encounters I've had with space, both in the government, out of the government, then back in the government, then back out of the government. And people say, think about space, it's what we call in the military a domain. And most people like to talk about staying inside the domain. Well, you've already heard several comments today about what we would now today call the whole of government approach. And in the domains from the military standpoint, it's space, it's cyber, it's all these guys down here. You cannot talk about space without talking about the other domains that the military talks about all the time. If you do that, you're putting yourself in an extreme disadvantage, because if we're attacked in space, your mind says we got to go do something in space. You don't have to. You can go do it on the ground or in the air or in cyber. So let me disabuse you of the fact that thinking space is for space, and you only think about space. That is absolutely dead set wrong. Okay, next. This is, again, an Air Force trait, data-rich charts. Pay attention to the one with the 5 red arrows. Space is more congested, it's crowded, it's contested, and it's complicated. The next one, I talked about 5 domains. It's well beyond the military's boundaries. You've got to talk whole of government. If you do something in space in the United States, we can do something economically, or politically, or diplomatically, or information-wise. It has nothing to do with using an instrument of power that belongs to the military. That's the second point. Down there at number 5, there are so many technologies and phenomenologies and ways to using those things that we don't have any comprehension of. And this puts everybody at a disadvantage because you're subjecting yourself to surprise, whether you're on the blue side or the red side. It takes no more dollars for a smart person in the red side to think of a new way of applying new technology than it does for somebody on the blue side to figure out, well, we went to the second offset. First offset was nuclear weapons. Second offset was stealth, speed, and precision. We're still looking for the third offset. We're not sure what that is yet. Okay, so go down to the ninth one there. Space is arcane. It's archaic. And most people, even those who are space engineers, don't know enough about space to be anything more than dangerous. They're very expert on some facet of space, propulsion or sensors or communications. But overall, space is really, we're just starting to get there. We've been doing space for half a century, but we're still learning an awful lot every day. The last one down here, the 12th one, this is where, I know some of you are in the policy business. The policies and laws regarding space, as Brian just alluded to, are behind the technologies and episodes that are going on. But that's no different. We built a nuclear weapon without having a policy. We used it, and then we said, oh, God, we better have a policy when we use and don't use these things. So space right now is not being led by policies or strategies that are whole of government, that are well thought through, because in every situation, the enemy gets a vote. And so we can't dictate, as Brian would have us talking to, it would be very nice to have laws or policies that everybody agreed to. There are reasons why we don't agree to them, and there are reasons why China and Russia don't agree to them. So I don't mean to talk down to anybody or insult anybody, but this is what I've done for the last 56 years. And we concluded this definition here. This is my own, so by the way, I should tell you, I don't speak for intelligence community. I don't speak for DOD. I don't speak for the U.S. government, and I'll probably disavow anything I say myself. So you take that with a grain of salt. Intelligence is just stuff you collect with the idea of doing something to make it knowledge and understanding. Not just knowledge, but understanding, which is another step higher on the food chain. In order to improve confidence or reduce risk and uncertainty and ignorance for decision makers. That's it. That's why you have intelligence. And if you do those things, what happens is you decide, well, what knowledge and understanding do I need on what issues and for what decision makers? Okay, so that gives you the idea of priorities. Now, again, this is a basic intelligence 101. We get information from different sources. There are normally only 5. I added the 6th one there, legging. And it's not the size of your socks or the size of your nylons. It is when you start talking about terrorism, there are 2 parts of terrorism. What we worry about domestically and possibly where terrorists come from a foreign area. Now, foreign, okay, intelligence is all over that. Domestically, oh, you can't do that. That's domestic. We put ourselves at a distinct disadvantage if we don't marry the foreign with the domestic. And so I coined the term legged, which there is law enforcement, basically. But if you're not doing that, if you're not doing it well, that's why the FBI has people in our embassies overseas. To start that process earlier so we can combine foreign intelligence, which is the intelligence business, and domestic intelligence, which is the FBI's. And then you have all kinds of analysis stuff there in the yellow box. That's the way you take the digits and you make knowledge and understanding. And then you have users over on the right side there. And if the outputs aren't timely, aren't tailored, and aren't actionable, you won't get the right result. You probably won't always get it anyhow because the intelligence isn't foolproof. You will never, ever, ever have 100% of all the intelligence you want. Even if you did, you might misinterpret it. So as an intelligence guy, I always liked at the staff meetings with all the 4 stars, I like to sit between the communicator and the weather guy. because those are the only two people who were on less certain ground than me. Comms never worked the way you wanted, and weather was always unpredictable. So I could kind of hide down there and say, well, I'm going to get it wrong, but so do these guys. Now, so what are the intelligence missions? They're in the blue blocks there. Protect America, ensure our economic well-being. Prevent strategic surprise. And deter, neutralize, mitigate, defeat threats. That's simple. That's motherhood and apple pie.
Yeah.
The problem starts when you look at the middle boxes there. There's a lot of people at this trough saying, I want more intelligence. Because they each have a different view of what they want. And I want it in this fashion, in this timeline, and so on and so forth. And you're never going to please them all. So the one we work to please the most is in the executive branch and the legislative branch. And then we get around to defense and state and the rest of the people. But we got a lot more people coming to talk to us now, non-government organizations. When I was a J2 in Europe, we were in Africa all the time. And the non-government organizations were constantly saying, can't you get me U2 imagery, or can't you get me satellite imagery of this migration or this health problem? Yeah, we can do that, but I'm going to stop supporting Desert Storm in order to do that. So when you put a demand on intelligence, I have a good friend who was the chief of the national intelligence, James Clapper, and every time I go in and bitch and moan about, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, he'd say, okay, what do you want me to stop doing? I'll be happy to do that, but what do I throw off the table? That's really a tough problem. And I keep telling him that's what you get the big bucks for. Okay, over on the right there's just a partial list of all the applications that you can put intelligence to. Lots of things, everybody, and they kind of represent what all those users want. I want to know the strategy, I want to know the enemy's budget, I want to know their doctrine, their tactics, I want to know all that stuff. In today's focus today, we're talking about the one in red, they're number 15, indications and warnings, so we don't get surprised. But as you see, that's just one. I think there's 34 on there, and there's a lot more that I didn't put on there. So we're going to focus on that for the next few seconds. And if you just look at space, there are a lot of animals at the trough for space. So when you look here, in blue are the operators. Those are the people who have to fight if we're going to use space-related information, space-related weapons, or defend weapons in space. Defend communications in space. In yellow are the policymakers, and the president, and the Congress, and the SecDef are up there. In the kind of tan down there towards the bottom are all the intelligence guys and gals. Over in green are the people who want to buy stuff that's going to make it better for us in the future. Most of our systems take 5, 10, 15 years to build. So intelligence's job is to say, what is a threat going to be 5, 10, 15 years from now? Good luck. The way technology changes, hard to do. And then over here in the bottom left, you got some new people who are also interested. And the way we fight wars now in coalitions, you have got to work with your allies. And the allies have needs too. Okay, so it's really hard to believe that we have people who don't understand what a space system is. You say space system, they go like this. Something up there at night, I might not see at nighttime. So everything up there is a space system, but all the stuff below the red line is part of the space system. If I want to denigrate your space capabilities, I don't want to have to spend a lot of money to get a satellite up there to take you out. If I can use a backhoe and cut your cable. So when you talk about a threat to a space system, you're talking about stuff in space and stuff on the ground. And there's a lot of things on the ground there. Manufacturing. If I can put a bad chip in your vehicle, then I control your vehicle. If I can screw up your launch facility in some way, I can screw you up. Mission ground stations, if I can control your ground stations in some way or denigrate your ground stations, your space systems up there can work great, but you're not gonna get anything out of them. So on down the line. Pardon me?
May I ask a question about?
Sure.
Can you explain the bottom corner arrows, the requirements and intelligence?
Okay, so what you generally get over here, I try to represent probably poorly the White House, the Congress, and the Pentagon as people who have great needs for intelligence. So they put that into the requirements process, and the intelligence people get that and then pass it up to, in this case, satellites, or airplanes, or whatever, ships. So when we talk about, again, focusing just on that one of those 34 items, INW, indications and warning, it means a whole lot, because a lot can happen in space. And again, going down to the ground, if I can screw up the supply chain, I got you beat. A physical attack, I got you beat. Especially if you have very few of those high-value assets on the ground. If I can disrupt that, and I can tell you a lot of ways, but I'd have to shoot myself afterwards, because I'd be going to jail. Ways that we look at attacking our systems to reduce their capabilities. Workforce. We were talking, Dorothy and I were talking about Snowden the last night before last and again today. We got, I'll just give you a rough number, 1 million people cleared for secrets. Now, out of that million, we're absolutely certain as red-blooded Americans that none of them are bad eggs. Absolutely none of them. Well, except maybe a Coast Guard officer, except maybe Snowden, except. So there's some bad eggs in that workforce. Cyber. You can get a kid with a $700 laptop from Radio Shack and he can do some damage to you. Then you get a sophisticated enemy like somebody who could attack Sony and screw up, God forget, screw up our celebrities in Hollywood. That's really serious stuff. That's a surprise. I'm surprised they didn't blame on intelligence. This is probably the guts of what I want to talk about, because it's really, really important, particularly to what Brian talked about. So this is a definition straight out of the DoD's definitions book. This is what hostile intent is. And what you're doing here is you're trying to say, my job, prevent surprise. I want to see as far back in front of a hostile action. I want to tell that there's a hostile intent, they're going to do something bad. Okay? Then, if you have done that, you should be able to tell when there's going to be a hostile act. And that, again, is a definition straight out of the DoD. Now, the interesting thing here is the distance between those is where you get warning and what you do with that warning. And that's really, really important to space and cyber, because the decision time where we had 30 minutes for time of flight of an ICBM from the Soviet Union to the United States, we had 30 minutes to think about it. The Chinese would use the term dithering. And if that decision time is reduced, as it is with space and cyber, as you'll see here, you might not be able to react in time. And that'll be the next slide. So what we're talking about here now, and back to Brian's point, we're talking about how do you characterize each of the things in that gray box that you need to know before someone can pull a bomb off of a weapon, pull a trigger, drop something, whatever it turns out to be, to protect yourself. And in the case of space, this is really important. Will we get years' notice? We'll get years' notice when we see them start to write about it, when we see them start to research it, when we see them start to build it and test it and exercise it. That's a hostile intent. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that particular thing? Well, because they plan to use it. They don't have a lot of resources to waste either. So in the case of space, when I've got hours, minutes, and seconds, if you wanted to take out a spacecraft that's at geosynchronous orbit, 22,000 miles out there, it only takes 8 to 9 hours, 4.5 to 5 hours to get there from a direct descent and a satellite weapon. 4.5 to 5 hours. That's still a long time, but there's some problems on that. If you go at a low Earth orbit, 150 miles, it's 8 to 9 minutes. You've just closed that decision time down a lot. If you're using cyber or some other kinetic weapons, like a grappler that Brian alluded to, you might only have seconds. So what your problem is, how do I react in seconds? Now, Brian used the example, I've only got one satellite at risk. All right, so we take the first blow and then we react and we massively retaliate and all that sort of stuff. We build up our forces like we did in World War II. We mass forces like we did in Desert Storm, Desert Shield. What if we didn't have time to do that? What if instead of one attack, you're getting cyber and space at the same time to the point where, how many of you used your phone to get here today? In that system. You don't have it. It's not in your car either. How many used your ATM card in the last 2 days? A lot of you. Forget it, you don't have it. Because those depend on timing given by GPS satellites. How many of you talked to a relative anywhere in the world in the last day? You don't have it. Most of you won't have it. You might if you went underground cable or undersea cables, but we don't do that very much anymore. It's cheaper to go through space. So the problem here is those norms up there do not exist. They are basically de facto norms. They're not de jure norms that Dr. Chow alluded to. So what you're saying here in the green box is, are there analogs in space and cyber that go along with air? Because I give this for Air Force people primarily. So you understand, well, we've had 100 years of experience with air. We've had centuries of experience of ground and Navy. We don't have centuries with space and cyber. So the question is, I've showed this to allies. They don't even agree with the definitions of hostile act and hostile intent. If you can't get that first level of agreement, how do you get it a norm that becomes a de jure thing? Very tough. So how do we change these terms or invent new terms if we need them? That's the issue. Here's the bottom line for a military person, or anybody in the military chain of command, from the president on down. You want unambiguous, timely indications of hostile intent and hostile action. You want to be on the green side of that, which is strategic warning. So I've got plenty of time to think through what I'm going to do, get the right people to consult, and decide what action I'm going to take. If something happens in space, am I going to do something in space? Am I going to do it on the ground? Am I going to do it economically? You want that time. You're buying time, and in space you don't always have it. The object in space and cyber is really hard to achieve, very hard. So what happens then, the key issues, the issues that we're struggling with, allies and adversaries who are using space. What are the rules of engagement? If I've got this high value asset in space, and a bad guy comes up, whether he's 50 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers or 10 kilometers, what do? What is my rule of engagement? Any platoon leader in the Marine Corps will tell you, I know what my ROE are, and I have the right to defend myself. We haven't defined the right to defend yourself very well in space. So the rules of engagement are very, very important. The other thing is I've tried to demonstrate time compression for decision making. What that delegation of authority means, it starts with the president, it goes to the secretary of defense, it goes to the combatant commander, and then generally it's going to go to some task force commander. Might be a 3-star, it might be a 2-star, it might be a 4-star. He wants to know what I can do with going back for a mother may I. Because if you've only got 8 minutes, there's a lot of time lag in there, and you're compressing your decision time. So this is one of the things that we're really working on right now, because these are policy issues. The military can grouse about them, tell you I need ROE, I need delegated authorities. But the president is fully within his right of saying, you, the intelligence community, are telling me you need me to delegate to that commander the right to act without my okay under certain situations. You, the intelligence community, gave me WMD in Iraq as a slam dunk. You are telling me something happened 22,000 miles out in space, and I don't have a CNN there to verify it. Not so fast, GI. We're going to talk about this a little more. In that talking period, the dithering, I'm sorry, that's a pejorative term, the in-depth discussions of decisions, what happens during that time is you're probably going to take the first hit. So, final slide. We work with coalitions on the ground in the Navy. We're going to work with coalitions in space. I've already mentioned this, the third one there. You need foundational intelligence, which is basic information. The assumption during the Cold War was that both sides, there were only two sides, Russia or Soviet Union and the US, they were both rational actors who relied on being able to inflict unacceptable costs on the other side to prevent something bad from happening. You got too many players in the game and too many things that can go wrong. It's hard to determine what a rational actor is these days. When I will strap 50 pounds on my chest, walk into a synagogue and blow it up. How are you going to determine that? I'm going to kill your family. Well, that's not the American way. So it's pretty hard. Number 5 is really important. Discontinuity, the idea that you can be surprised. And then finally down there, 11. We're watching a creeping threshold. You saw the Chinese in the South China Sea build islands. They are now de facto in control of that area. That's a new norm. You saw Russia take over parts of the Crimea. That's a new norm. And with that, I'll shut up and sit down.